Famed for reimagining the classics, especially Ibsen and Shakespeare, Thomas Ostermeier is regarded as a leading visionary of international theatre.
There's one quote, one of my most favorite quotes in Hamlet, which goes, "There is no right and wrong, only thinking makes it."
And in the transcendence of right and wrong, Ostermeier probes existential questions.
It's Shakespeare. What is your principle adapting his works?
My principle is digging deep and getting dirty.
Yet for Ostermeier, there is one unpardonable saying.
You can do evergreen, but there's one thing is forbidden: to bore the audience, to be boring.
His unconventional stagings and outspoken opinions do at times provoke controversy.
I don't think about how to attract younger audiences, never. I'm doing the theater which I want to do, and I'm trying to do it in the best way.
Meet Thomas Ostermeier and hear his take on all things theatrical, only on Icon.
Thomas Ostermeier, ladies and gentlemen.
Thomas Ostermeier, one of Germany's foremost theater directors and managers, is a major force among China's theater circles too. So when he came to the picturesque water town of Wuzhen in eastern China for its annual theater festival last autumn, Icon was keen to catch up with him. Even though Ostermeier was not bringing a show of his own to Wuzhen this time, his day was so packed that we didn't get to sit down with him until nightfall.
So good evening and welcome to Wuzhen. First
Hello.
time in Wuzhen.
First time in Wuzhen, yeah.
Had a very busy day today.
Yeah, some workshops, some dialogue with the audience, some talk on a panel, some interviews, daily business.
Right. You didn't bring your own play here this time to the festival.
Not this time. We were about to, but then we were in another city in Russia, in White Russia, in Minsk, so we couldn't come. But Meng Jinghui, who's a good friend of mine for years, and following my work, he wanted me to have at least to do 2 days of a workshop and meet the audience and have some impression of the city and of the festival to seduce me to come here with a show. And I'm tempted, let's say.
What show would you bring?
Well, we were talking about Richard III, which I just premiered, which is a new Shakespeare play, which was an Avignon festival, theater festival this summer.
You're also the artistic director of that festival?
I was at a certain moment. Now I'm permanent guest, let's say. A very important festival, and we had a great time there. We had 12 performances. But I think Meng Jinghui saw it in Berlin for the premiere. And since he saw it, we're discussing possibilities to come here. But still, Hamlet is also still in repertoire, so we try to bring back Hamlet to China. But also Enemy of the People, and I'm pretty curious what will come out of all these negotiations. We never performed in Shanghai. We performed in Tianjin and in Beijing, but never in Shanghai. And I would love to go to Shanghai. I was, before I came here, 3 days in Shanghai and in the festival, Shanghai Arts Festival, giving a talk. And then I did a lecture at the Shanghai Theatre Academy. And then yesterday during the day, I was a guest at the Beijing Opera Academy of Tianmanja. And I was attending the classes, and I was hugely impressed.
By Peking Opera?
I was hugely impressed by as kind of incredible, precious relationship you can see between the teachers and the disciples. Something which you don't have in Western culture anymore.
You mean the training system?
How they communicate, how they are literally giving from one generation to another generation this art form. And this kind of relationship we do have in Western society, maybe in music still, but not in any other art form. It's completely in opposite to what we try to do or what we think is performance art. It's always about authenticity and individualism, individualistic expression. When you see this, it is, in a way, it's very advanced because it's not about authenticity, it's not about your individuality on the first hand, but it's about the form, and the form has to be learned over 7, 8, 9, 10 years before you go on stage, and then comes the artist giving life or spirit and breath to it. And this is amazing because it's completely opposite to what performance art is in the West. But I think we would be lucky if we had a similar kind of tradition and a similar kind of relationship between disciples, students and masters.
Well, interesting you're saying that, and this is like the traditional way of teaching, passing on, you know, all these traditional arts, especially true with Peking opera and all these traditional, actually, opera forms, and also with crosstalk. That's another different. It's a comedy, you know, two people talking to each other, make people laugh. I mean, that's like the way they adopt, you know, from one generation to a younger generation. But at the same time, you're saying this is good and this is perfect way for passing on the skills. But we're actually having this discussion, say, well, you know, we're living in this modern society. Everything should be modern. Look at, you know, what they're doing in the West. We have a modern school training system.
Yeah, but I think it is so precious to have this culture and this art form, which is not written down and which is passed over from one generation to another by an oral way, by telling and not writing it down. And this is something which you rarely meet in other cultures and traditions. And again, there was in the 20th century, this form of theater was very important for theater avant-gardists like Meyerhold and Brecht. Both saw Mei Lang Fang when he was in Russia, in Moscow, performing as guest performance, and they both saw him there.
In the 1930s, maybe.
Yes,
yeah.
and they were hugely impressed, made a huge impact on Meyerhold's biomechanics and theater method, and on Brecht's epic theater. And this Brecht epic theater is kind of the most important impulse for German theater and for all the German avant-garde theater which we had in the 80s or in the 60s, starting 60s, 70s. So this Verfremdungseffekt, alienation effect by acting, the distance between the role, the character, and the performer. That the performer all the time shows, hey, I'm playing a role, I'm showing you the role, I'm showing you what's happening here.
All the moves are symbolic.
And yes, and this you have in Beijing opera on a highly developed art form and much more developed than we ever could imagine having it in the West. But the principle behind is actually something which is very important nowadays in performing arts, to not have identity between performer and role. Not the same. Yeah? It's like the performer is like the puppeteer of the role. And this you can study in such a beautiful way in Beijing opera. And I think it's very, it's worth looking at it and understanding it, maybe understanding one day even the principles of it. So not copying the form, but thinking about the content and the principles and then adapting it to another form. That I would say would be the big challenge with this form of theater.
Precocious, prolific, progressive. How to describe Thomas Ostermeier's blazing stage career? By his late 20s, he was already making his name running Barock, a small experimental space at Berlin's Deutsches Theater for a young generation of boundary pushers. Then in 2000, at the age of 31, he, with 3 others, took over artistic direction of Berlin's prestigious Schaubuhn Theatre. And in his early 40s, he picked up the Golden Lion Award for Lifetime Achievement at the Venice Biennale. Meanwhile, Ostermeier's controversial adaptation of Shakespeare's Hamlet in 2008 gained him international recognition as one of Germany's leading young directors.
You have your parts to play in all these productions. But if you talk about Hamlet in Tianjin, how did that go with the audience?
It made a huge impact, as far as I can tell. I met a lot of people here in Wuzhen. I meet people in Shanghai. Telling me they took a plane from Shanghai to go there. They took a plane from Beijing to go there. So I was like, what is this? They're going on a plane to see a show, and everybody's talking about it. And it seems to have had a massive impact, at least on the professional theater milieu in China. And when I gave the speech at the Theatre Academy, there were loads of people, and a lot of them saw the show either live or online. So, yeah, in a way, it fell on a fertile ground here, on a fertile soil, this production. And it seems that the Chinese audience saw something or identified something which made an impression on them or told them something. We have been talking the last 3 days about Shakespeare here. The big gift we have with Shakespeare is that he's involving so many layers of different cultures. You have popular culture, you have fight scenes, you have physical theater, you have poetry, you have philosophy, you have all the deep questions about life, like death, love, power. And this in one package. And I think the beauty is that you have the variety of all these genres in one evening.
Is he still contemporary?
He is, in a way, contemporary concerning several bits of his. First of all, he's talking about power. Power is still a major issue of human mankind. What is power? How is power abusing a character? How is it? Can it spoil a character? Are men able to live power? How do they get to power? Why do they want to get to power? What makes them go over corpses, dead bodies, in order to become powerful? That's a question. And it's about these strategies of getting there. When you talk about Richard, it's all about the strategy, how do I achieve to be king? This is still contemporary, very contemporary. Then you have, in all what I was describing before, in the form, I think it's very eclecticistic, this art form, very postmodern art form, because you have this variety of forms. You have very deep philosophical thinking, and at the same time very popular comical scenes. You have physical action, you have fighting scenes, fencing scenes, and you have the beauty of literature and the conflict and the story. So this makes it very contemporary, in my view, because we are living in a society where, on one hand, you go to a Bach concert in the evening, the next morning you go into your car and listen to Michael Jackson, and then you go out eating Asian food for lunch, and then you go into a museum of contemporary art, and in the evening you go to a pop concert. So we are used to this variety of cultures which we are meeting during a day. So this is what Shakespeare does, and that's why I would consider him contemporary, and most of all, and most important, he doesn't have an answer.
It's all open.
He has no answer. He has no answer to the question of... there's one quote, one of my most favorite quotes in Hamlet, which goes, there is no right and wrong, only thinking makes it. Which means he has no morality. He is confronted with the world, or he confronts us with the world, with the complexity of the world, but he cannot say how to make it better, or who is responsible, or who is the enemy, and who is doing wrong and who is doing right. And the world Shakespeare was writing was the time of Elizabethan times, and it was a world of complete prosperity. The invention of capitalism, the first time of emerging markets, of trade, very rich society, prosperous society, and at the same time, very society with loads of battles, wars.
But it's Shakespeare. And it's like everyone is reinterpreting Shakespeare's works. Everyone is making their own adaptations. I mean, what is your principle if you have a set written one? What is your principle adapting his works?
My principle is digging deep and getting dirty.
What do you mean by getting dirty?
When you closely go down into the text, you are in every Shakespeare play confronted with your own abyss. All the main characters in Shakespeare's performances are confronted with an immense abyss, which is the human character. It is able
little
to do
evil inside.
Yes, which is able to do the best and the worst at the same time. So when I say digging deep and getting dirty, by getting dirty, I would say it's not very comfortable to be confronted with all this when you deal with these texts, because you're confronted with your own little devil, and you're confronted with your own weakness, you're confronted with your own hypocrisy, you're confronted with your own sexuality, you're confronted with your own dark side and temptation to the dark side. You know? That's what I mean by getting dirty. I have the great privilege of looking at the mirror every day via Shakespeare, and what I see is not nice and not comfortable, but it is an immense privilege to have the time and the space to do this. And I'm lucky enough that a lot of audiences around the world share my interest for Shakespeare, and they probably have the feeling that this guy is taking it serious, which does not mean it's not entertaining, but I'm taking it serious in the sense of wait, Hamlet is like this, who said so? And then I'm not saying I'm doing a version which has to be different, but I'm trying to closely read the text and try to analyze really. And that's also how I did with Richard III. One friend of mine, a lady from Paris, after having seen the show in Berlin, and she's a huge theater lover and opera lover. She goes all over the world to see opera and theater. And she came to me and said, Thomas, you did really something very nasty to me. Because at the first time I saw Richard, and I saw a lot of versions of Richard, I pitied him. In the end of the play, I pitied this guy who did so wrong, who killed so many people, who wanted to become king and killed his brother, killed the children of his brother, killed another brother, and all this he did, but still, all of a sudden, I pitied him. And this is for me an incredible compliment, that you are confronted with evil and still you have the feeling of, I could do the same.
Ostermeier has made a career out of shocking conservative audiences with his brand of social realism and outspoken opinions. That even applies to his interpretations of classic plays, especially the works of Henrik Ibsen, such as A Doll's House or Enemy of the People.
We're talking about these values, and people also talk about that a lot. And everything is going so fast, every day, everywhere. It seems we're fighting for our lives all the time. But how do you see the role of theater in this process of bringing back all these old values?
The role of theater today is we do live in a two-dimensional world. Everything what we get as information, even us on screen here, it comes in the living room two-dimensional. Next day when I look at my computer, it's two-dimensional. Images in a newspaper, two-dimensional. So we are having all the time a screen between us and the world outside. And we are lucky enough to have this because nobody wants to be in Syria in the three-dimensional horror of what's happening there. So that's always between us and our outside world a screen. It's not smelling, you cannot touch it, you cannot change perspective. I'm not deciding which camera is on. You decide it. It's your editing. This is not in theater. In theater, you decide. You sit there in a democratic way. I watch this guy. I pay attention here. I focus on that. This is my story. I'm the creator of the story. I'm the editor of the movie in theater. Much more democratic. Secondly, everything what we see in fictionalized storytelling is pre-fabric. The movie is done, the shooting is over, the editing is done, everything is done. When I'm sitting in a cinema, nobody cares if I'm checking my mails while watching the movie. My actors do. And this is happening, they see it, they tell them, you stop it immediately. They take their iPhone, they take it, they play with it on stage, they put it in their pocket. There's permanent interaction, and this is, as far as I can tell, I don't know if this is the truth, but this is my theory why we are so successful with my theater, because for a younger generation who is not used at all that between the I that they are and the world outside there's a connection because there's a screen. They don't care if you're naked in front of the screen, if you're drunken, if you're smoking, if you're taking cocaine in front of the screen. There's no interaction. And all of a sudden they get to theater and everything is happening in the moment. It's now, it's three-dimensional, and it's only happening once and only shared by the 500 people in the space. It cannot be repeated, it cannot be copied, it cannot be hang on the wall like in the fine arts. It's only them and the performer, and this is an authentic moment of interaction and of meeting, which we don't have in the rest of our societies. It's here and now, and of course this is the best and perfect way of talking about life, because life is only happening once. And when you die, you cannot ask somebody to digitalize your life and put repeat and play it again. No, this is life. It's the one and only moment, And that's why this represents life. All of a sudden, after 2,000 years of theater history, all of a sudden, I would even say this digitalized world is a chance, and it's a gift for the art of theater.
Well, you mentioned the topic of audience, especially the younger audience. Actually, theater artists in China, they're also thinking about this, and sometimes they find it frustrating because the younger generation, they're facing too much temptations, actually. I mean, theater art, it's, like you said, it's old and sometimes
Dusty.
it's dusty,
Boring,
whatever word they
bad
use,
costumes.
and they have, you know, entertainment, more entertaining forms of art. But it seems not a problem for you. How do you attract that?
That's a question I'm always been asked, and here comes my answer I'm giving everywhere, and it's true, even though it sounds again a bit arrogant. I don't think about it. I don't think about how to attract younger audiences. Never. I'm doing the theater which I want to do, and I'm trying to do it in the best way. And one part of doing it in the best way is who's the guy who did 1, 2, 3? Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder once said to his students, you can do everything in the cinema. You can do everything on screen, but there's one thing is forbidden: to bore the audience, to be boring. And this is something theater artists have to take much more serious.
Okay, once again, thank you for your time and for sharing your insights with us. And
Thank you for having me.
Let's hope that in the future we're going to see your play being presented
I hope.
in Wuzhen or in Beijing or in Tianjin again.
Yes, I hope to be back. I love Chinese food and I love the culture here, so there's always a reason to be.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.